with something a bit extreme. This is a Patchinko. Got a friend here locally. He says that the bass are taking surface lures, which is quite rare at this time of year for where I am in Hastings. Got the 902, the cobalt rod, and this to start things off. We may be going back onto the black minnows. I wouldn't expect anything big today, but there might be bass around. Well, you can see what we're looking at here, quite a flat and featureless beach. So I'm going to start off with this surface lure, just see if we can get any rises from these fish. Wind is blowing right to left here. It's always quite interesting fishing a venue you've never fished before. You're full of hope, obviously. I need to be a little bit quieter because sometimes you come down here, you'll spook a fish, although those fish are usually mullet. You never know. We're over a bit of a mixed ground here. There's plenty of sand. Let's just see if we can get something to come and have a look at the Patchinko. I'm going to be casting into the wind and bringing it back. No sign of quite a big old thump when that goes down. There's no problem with this disturbing the water here. Varying the retrieve a little bit, keeping the tip high at times, but the lure really does all the work. So I can see some birds working off here, and there's a little bit of dry land that goes out into the channel. So I think what we'll do is we'll walk up a little bit, and then once we've put this out a few times, it'll be time to change the lure. Interesting old structure. We'll have a cast around here. As I say, it's strange to be using poppers this early on in the season, but I suppose the water here is really clear, and obviously if the sun's been on the mud here, a bit of localised heating, it's really nice to be able to cast the lure out. Quite a mild evening. Probably getting 40 metres. Let's just I'll try and put a little bit of effort into the like a drag and stop. Sometimes works. Of course, the big face on the front of that lure is creating what's hopefully looks like a bait fish in distress. Inquisitive schoolie bass will come up and have a look. That's what I mean about the face of it. So pushing that against the water. This time of year you're expecting the bass to be after the peeler crabs, but they will take a lure in these harbours, especially these schoolies. I do sometimes wonder whether the birds are here because there's fish or because they've actually come to have a look at this lure. What I'm doing with this one, I'm going to try and send it off down tide and then work it back up tide, just to try and get a little bit more depth. So we're going to swap over from this now and bounce this one along the bottom. This has got like a weedless hook. I can't even remember what make this is. Bit of a hybrid maybe. Might be the Axia one actually, looking at it. So generally this time of year the bass are a little bit more lethargic, so I'm just going to bounce this in amongst the weed nice and slow along the bottom. It's got a weight on the end. The head part is made of lead, or a lead substitute, so we should be able to get reasonable distance with that as well. And then if you're new to the channel, these are the breakaway links. We use those, I use those pretty much exclusively, those, so it's easier to change the lures. Yeah, he's picking up too much weed, trying to keep that rod tip high. It's just dragging a load of weed. Okay, I'm going to go back to the beach section with this, I think. Or maybe cast again, get some good distance, a little faster retrieve. So I'm going to head over to that point there, not the one right off in the distance. You see there. Only because if you look at the water, looks like there's some disruption in the water, not from fish, just where it's speeded. Looks like the water speeds up a bit there as it comes around that point. I'll take a little look. There's a few birds there as well, not too active, but lovely. This is Poole Harbour. Still looks quite shallow looking at the surface of this water. We'll see what sort of distance we can get this out. See what the weed situation's like. It's worth even moving a little bit. That's better. You're not right into the weed beds here. But I might try a little Patchinko again in a minute. This isn't a bad spot actually. If I can get the distance to try something like a do-live stick or a little soft plastic, something with a very lightweight like a Texas rigged worm. I'm going to go for another lure change. This is a Patchinko. It's called the 110 centimetres. A little bit of the wind off my back here. Got that little Patchinko on now. Trying a really slow retrieve now. So back later in the week, it's obviously a lot clearer here. It's nice to be able to see these lures work in the water. Of course you do need to be quiet. I'll keep one eye on the dog as well. We've had a change of rod just to make things a little bit more interesting. I'm using the Shimano Dialuna. This is a superb rod, but it'll only really cast up to about 10 grams. But what this gives me, I don't know if you can see or whether this picks it up. What this gives me is this super, not really a thin tip, but sensitive. And it means with things like the soft plastics, you can just add that little bit of movement. Just twitching like that will kick the lure into life. It really does look good. So, fishing with slightly lighter leader on this as well. We've gone down to 10 pound. And I think when it's flat calm like this and you first start fishing, a little Patchinko might be what we need just to cover some ground. What I'm doing is walking along here looking for fish, also looking for the dog that's gone missing. But more importantly, it'd be nice to find some fish, wouldn't it? Not you. Don't really power cast with this rod, it's sort of, you flick it, it's more of a flicking it. Quite a fast retrieve until I get to know this ground. Doing little circles here with the rod tip, because you can with the braid and this light rod. So there are a few little structures here, I'm just going along each one in turn. Because this rod's so light, I did want to try what it's like with a heavier 20 gram plus lure like this POPCHENKO 140, and we'll see what it's like on that tip. But I do want a little bit of extra distance. I can see a little current. I'm just going to try pop out the POPCHENKO. Yeah, it's well, no problem with the casting. In these calm conditions, if we were to pick up a bass, even you would see that out there. So it's actually creating quite a bit of disturbance on the water. It's such a shallow venue that although you'd normally fish these during the summer, literally in about 2 foot of water, it's not going to make as much difference. It's got like a zigzaggy left-right action, that, hasn't it? I could use this rod all day. Let's try this little random red lure. The water's quite clear. Got a little lead head on there, 15 gram. Again, this is still about the max that the Dialuna will take. On to this next jetty. I know you're waiting for me to fall over. Still a bit shallow here. There's an intensity to lure fishing that you don't get with the bait, and you should be really in tune with what you're doing with your left hand, your right hand, what the tide movement is, what you think the lure's doing, and just be ready all the time for bass. I mean, even today we're not catching anything. There's no signs of bass. This tide is really picking up around this point. It's adding a lot more movement, and actually if I do it right, that'll take the lure out all the way over to Brownsea Island. 6 to 12 foot of water further out, so I'm going to try and put a sinking shad on here. The water conditions are a lot more interesting at this spot. Patches of weed, patches of rock. Because of that tide's quite strong, I don't want to be pulling it against the tide towards me when the tide's going that way. The tide is racing out here though, which I like. Oh, you sure, dog? Are you sure? I can see you going in, you numbnut. I'll sit here waiting for a big splash behind me. Little obstruction over here on the left, and put it across there. Kids haven't broken up for Easter locally, so it's a lot quieter, I think, in and around the harbour. Yeah, no, not a sniff on this. Still bring that right to the rod tip though. And what I'm doing here, I'm not looking at the lure as it's here, I'm looking 15 foot away just to see if there was any fish turning back. Okay, there wasn't. I need to fall left if I'm going to fall in. Sorry, I didn't fall in. Lots of lugworm here as well. I bet there's plenty of rag in this harbour, as well as these lugworm. If you do like the sight of bass actually being caught, you can check out this video here on the right where we had quite a few, or the one on the left where we had a reasonably big one. Thanks ever so much for watching. I think you always learn something from these sessions, even though they're blanks, and it is a little bit early to be lure fishing. But I really do appreciate you watching. If you're out there fishing, then let us know. I hope you enjoy those other two videos as well.